Folks say treachery stings deepest when it comes from inside your own kin. I used to think that was just talk from television shows or paperbacks. But right then, seated at the expansive dark wooden meeting table facing the man who brought me up, I felt the absolute impact of those words hit me like a loaded train car. The space had a scent of old hides and shiny ambition. On the partition behind my parent hung a giant snapshot of the first location, the spot where the company he'd constructed from nothing had its start. He often remarked, "This enterprise is the heritage I'll pass down." What he didn't apparently state was that I wouldn't be a component of that heritage. My identifier is Clara Stone. Up until yesterday, I held the position of Head of Technology and Advancements at Stone Dynamics Group, the family enterprise. I devoted roughly 12 years helping it expand from a dusty local vendor to a nationwide supply chain force, connecting frameworks, improving processes, and crafting distinct tech that gave us a leg up in a competitive sector. I collaborated directly alongside my parent. I missed holidays, anniversary celebrations, even my personal engagement gathering to help make this firm what it is. And still there I sat, watching him lean back in his seat, interlace his fingers, and grin as he announced, "Your sibling is assuming leadership of the family business. You're no longer required." The statement didn't come with fury. There was no dramatic yelling or desk pounding. Just a cold, calculated declaration, one he had plainly rehearsed. Positioned around the table were the firm's board members, key executives, and my younger sibling, Liam. He avoided my gaze. He just looked straight ahead, jaw tight, dressed in the deep blue suit I'd selected for him during his first job chat here around 4 years back. The very same sibling who had once sobbed over the phone asking for my assistance to get ready for his initial funding presentation. "Dad," I stated softly, keeping calm. "I'm sorry. Could you say that again?" He nodded as though this were merely a report for investors, not a personal ambush. "Liam has demonstrated significant capability, and we feel he's ready to take authority. The board has sanctioned the transition. You will be stepping aside effective right now." I felt the gazes around the table turn towards me, curious, cautious, but not taken aback. They had knowledge. They had all known. I inhaled slowly. Then I stood up. "Understood," I said, my voice steady. "Everything clear." Liam finally glanced at me then. Perhaps he thought I might shout, cry, or beg. But I just opened my laptop device, pressed a few buttons, and stated, "The trial file for tomorrow's investor meeting is on the shared network space. It's all yours." I handed my laptop computer to the technology manager without another word. "Enjoy the investor trial tomorrow," I added with a slight grin, then turned on my heel and exited. I didn't turn back. I didn't have to, because just over a quarter hour after that meeting concluded, a sequence of concealed commands I had quietly placed into the demonstration would activate. Not to damage anything, but to expose something. Something my parent and sibling didn't know I had been gathering for about half a year. It began when I observed access histories at odd times, files copied without explanation. I installed monitoring tools, digital tripwires, and a guardian procedure tucked away within our main product's user interface. What I discovered: electronic messages, documents, gatherings I hadn't been invited to, planning meetings where my own concepts were presented without my name credited. It wasn't just deceit. It was appropriation, smoothed over with favoritism and offered with a grin. I had been constructing the company's future while they were building a future that didn't include me. So, I stopped attempting to contend for a spot at a table that was already being prepared for someone else. I got ready instead, not from a desire for revenge, but for my own security. Because the system they intended to display tomorrow, the smart logistics optimization instrument that secured our largest agreements, was my own invention, not my parents', not Liam's, and certainly not theirs to take without repercussions. Back in my living space that night, I didn't shed tears. I didn't yell on my phone or post a vague message online. I ordered Eastern food, uncorked a flask of grape liquid, and retrieved my individual backup storage. On the visual display, a timing device came into view. Trial mode initiation in just over a quarter hour. I smiled because they had zero inkling that tomorrow, before our most important investors, the system would request one item before it could function: verification from the primary inventor. And that inventor was no longer inside the building. By 9:05 in the morning the following day, My mobile phone had already vibrated more than 20 instances. I ignored everyone. Voicemails from my parent, a couple from Liam, one from Bethany, who managed investor contact, and another from an unfamiliar digit sequence I knew immediately was the private line to the meeting area. I allowed them to accumulate like neglected cautions. Nearly 9:40, I poured myself a brewed beverage, stepped outside onto my porch, and brought up the live investor streaming on a private backup tablet, the very one I'd utilized to simulate the platform's smart decision-making pathways. Ironically, the precise work they planned to showcase as Stone Dynamics' exclusive innovation. The camera feed was perfectly clear. I observed from afar as my parent stood before a polished visual aid, displaying the phrase System Apex gleaming behind him. He wore his distinctive crimson necktie, the one he saved for significant gatherings, and commenced his speech with practiced assurance. As numerous of you are aware, Stone Dynamics has consistently been a leader in logistics answers, he declared. But today, we're presenting something transformative. The presentation commenced as scheduled. A fluid automated interface described how the smart system operated, how it could learn from storage behaviors, enhance routes, reduce holdups, even cut expenses by closer to 30%. Then came the crucial instant. About 13 minutes into the presentation, the screen flickered just once, then again. My parent paused. A few investors shifted in their seats. The interface blinked twice and a new display materialized. Not the one they had practiced with. Authorization failure. Original inventor codes absent. Kindly insert valid security marker to continue. I could practically hear the quietness through the screen. My parent tapped the touch screen once, twice, then glanced over at the technology supervisor who sat motionless behind his laptop computer. Is this supposed to be part of the demonstration? One investor inquired. And then the screen changed again. Unauthorized usage detected. Inventor has started Ethical Adherence Procedure 7.4. Inner system records now available to all relevant parties. And just like that, the records began scrolling. Every time-stamped paper, every late-night access, every unapproved conference between Liam and an external consultant discussing permission arrangements before my official dismissal. Even email threads debating when to remove me, not whether. Slightly before 9:50 a.m., my parent finally telephoned again. This time I answered. "Clara," he said, his voice low, as though he was trying to remain composed in a room full of disarray. "What exactly did you do?" I didn't respond immediately. "You triggered a halt on our single most vital presentation," he continued. "Do you have any concept of how this appears to investors?" "I do," I stated. "It appears as though your company attempted to delete the sole individual who made that system achievable." There was a prolonged quiet. "I didn't realize Liam went behind your back," he finally admitted. "That wasn't the strategy." I allowed that to hang in the air for a moment. "But eliminating me completely was the strategy, correct?" Further quietness. "You didn't even consult me," I proceeded. "You just concluded I was no longer needed. As if I hadn't given over a decade to build what you now refer to as System Apex." "Listen," he said, his voice softening. "Perhaps we hurried things. There's still a spot at the table for you." "No," I stated firmly. "There isn't. Not anymore." I ended the call, and that's when the subsequent alert arrived on my personal interface. Ethical violation report sent to stakeholders. Finished. It wasn't about ruining the enterprise. It was about unveiling the reality. I had configured the system to duplicate the full inner ethics examination to every investor's electronic mailbox. Not out of malice, but transparency. They were entitled to understand what kind of leadership they were supporting, what kind of actions were being concealed behind red ties and boardroom smiles. By 11 a.m., 3 board members had resigned. 2 investors withdrew their proposals, and the remainder requested an urgent ethics assessment before moving forward with any more capital. I didn't celebrate. This wasn't a win. Not yet. But it was certainty. For the initial time and periods, I wasn't questioning if I was overdoing it. I wasn't deceiving myself into silence. I had instructed the system to safeguard itself, to safeguard what we had constructed, and it had obeyed. Individuals typically observe the final result, accomplishment, disruption, retaliation. But they seldom witness the periods leading up to it. The quiet relinquishments, The fatigue that never quite leaves your physical being, the family meals missed, the strained affiliations, the evenings you doze off at your workstation with coding still visible behind your eyes. That encompassed my existence for almost a decade. After completing my higher education in systems engineering, I received propositions from large tech firms and 2 early-stage ventures. But I selected the family operation Stone Dynamics Group because I had faith in what my parent had established. I believed I could advance it further. At that point, the enterprise was struggling to modernize. My parent didn't grasp automated processes, smart learning, or even distributed network setups. He was traditional. He believed in handshakes, ledgers, and faithfulness. Or so I assumed. I didn't enter demanding a job rank or salary. I began low, project advisor, then principal developer, then tech strategist. Each year, I built something fresh: inventory mapping programs, storage automation, intelligent routing frameworks, and eventually Apex, although that wasn't its designation then. Apex began as a secondary initiative, a smart program trained to identify inefficiencies in distribution networks. But over time it evolved. It started foretelling disturbances before they occurred: shipment delays, supplier fraud, interleaks. It wasn't just about optimizing. It was about safeguarding. I demonstrated it to Liam once, back when he was still merely the young person trying to assist. He had come to my workspace late in the evening, observing me construct neural pattern diagrams on large whiteboards and scribble logic sequences in the edges of my beverage-stained pads. "This is unbelievable," he had commented once, watching Apex rearrange a delivery sequence in real time after predicting a labor stoppage. "It's as if the smart program can foresee the future." "No," I replied. "It detects patterns and it learns." At that moment, he looked at me with wonder. That was prior to the board gatherings he commenced attending unaccompanied. Before he ceased replying to my messages, before the rumors began, I didn't want to accept it. Not even when I discovered the initial indicators: a duplication of my basic structure shared under Liam's credentials, a financial line item for software scaling that I hadn't authorized, meeting invitations related to Apex demonstrations with my name missing from the list. Initially, I convinced myself it was a misunderstanding, that Liam was simply awkward or eager, that Dad was unaware. But when I brought it up gently, respectfully, my parent looked me directly in the eye and stated, "Perhaps it's opportune to allow your sibling to take the forefront on some of these initiatives. He possesses a talent for business." A talent. That's the term he used for it. That evening, I remained in the workplace until past 2:30 in the morning. I stared at the fundamental programming of my very own creation and thought, what if they genuinely attempt to seize this? What if they bar me entirely? So I commenced incorporating protections, not harmful software, not destruction, just a quiet line of reasoning that stated, if the authentication process does not match the primary inventor's key set, the system automatically ceases operation. No fuss, just information. I also began encoding duplicates of every major development milestone and saved them off the main network. And I waited. Now, in the wake of the unsuccessful investor demonstration, everything had initiated precisely as intended. Liam had telephoned around 6 times already that afternoon. I didn't pick up, but I listened to one of his voicemails just to hear the tone. "Clara," he said, voice tight with strain. "We need to talk. Look, I understand things got complex, but we didn't intend to shut you out. It was Dad's instruction, all right? I was merely going along with it. Merely going along with it." That phrase repeated in my thoughts for periods because merely going along with it is the starting point of treachery. Not in ill will, in quiet, in the choice not to speak up, not to interfere. Just after 4:30 in the afternoon, Bethany from Investor Relations emailed me directly. "Clara, several key parties are inquiring if you will be returning to finish the System Apex demonstration. A proposition is forming to provide you an advisory capacity and a revised financial arrangement. Kindly think about replying within a day. The board is receptive to reconsideration. Regards, Bethany F." They were rushing, and I could have accepted the proposition. I could have walked back into that office, negotiated ownership, a different job rank, a substantial payment, smiled courteously, and pretended we were all on the same team once more. But I didn't desire a position at a tainted table. I didn't want hush funds or a fancy job title that meant nothing. I desired something more valuable: integrity, acknowledgement, and the authority to guarantee that what I had constructed would never be utilized against me again. So I drafted my reply with exactness. Bethany, many thanks for your message. I am open to a conversation, but I will not be returning under a temporary advisory label. I am ready to resume leadership of the System Apex venture under conditions that encompass formal recognition as its originator, 55% ownership of intellectual property, and veto power on ethical usage scenarios. Otherwise, the system remains inaccessible. Sincerely, Clara Stone. I hit send and closed the laptop device. This time, I wasn't awaiting permission. That evening, I received a dinner invitation. It arrived in the form of a brief, official message from my parents' assistant. Clara, your parent has requested a private dinner to discuss the future of the company and your position within it. He anticipates you will accompany him tonight at 7:15 in the evening at the Ambassador Room. A booking has been made under Stone. Sarah Jensen. The Ambassador Room, his preferred eatery, the identical one where we celebrated the company's first $12 million financial period, back when I still believed this enterprise was a family and not merely a trademark. I considered disregarding the message, but then I recalled something an aged advisor once told me: never depart from the negotiation when they're finally prepared to admit they require you. Let them vocalize it clearly. So I dressed smartly, arrived. Walked in precisely on schedule, finding my father already seated at a table in the corner, a glass of wine in his hand, the menu untouched. He stood up when he saw me. Clara. I gave a nod. Dad. No embraces, no forced pleasantries, just silence as I settled into the seat opposite him. He observed me closely, as though attempting to decipher the feelings I wasn't displaying. You seem well, he commented. Strong. I am. He cleared his throat slightly. You've certainly made quite an impact in the last day or so. Funny, I replied, tilting my head slightly. I've been making impacts for about a dozen years now. You just weren't paying attention. That quieted him for a moment. Then came the familiar sigh, the one I recognized all too well. Part annoyance, part manufactured humility. I'll admit we misjudged things, he started. Asking you to leave when we did was too soon. I offered no reply. I wanted to see his angle, whether he was here to apologize or to try to negotiate with the same manipulative tactics he used in business meetings. You've built something remarkable, he went on, and we'd like you to return. Daniel agrees. The board is prepared to offer you a shared director position, matching his salary, joint supervision of the Genesis project, and a bonus payment covering previous periods. I lifted an eyebrow. That's charming. He frowned. Clara. No, I cut in. Let's not pretend this is about equity. You didn't come here offering balance. You came because the operation won't function properly without me, and the investors are threatening to pull out. I leaned forward slightly, my voice quiet but resolute. You came because you lost authority. He just looked at me, his jaw clenching. You're being unreasonable. Reasonable? I echoed. Dad, I spent a decade turning your concept into something that could transform an entire field. I sacrificed everything: safety, relationships, time itself. And when it finally began to work, when it became something tangible, you handed it over to Daniel like some sort of reward for just showing up. His eyes narrowed. You're overreacting. Daniel may not have your technical ability, but he has vision. No, he has ambition, I snapped back. And you gave him mine. For a brief time, we simply sat there, two individuals who had once been father and daughter, now merely two professionals discussing ownership of the same enterprise. He finally asked, "What is it you want?" There it was. The question I had been anticipating. I already told Sarah, I stated. I want 55% of the Genesis intellectual property, formal acknowledgement as its creator, control over every implementation, and approximately $4.5 million in back pay for the unauthorized use of my work. His jaw tightened further. That's excessive. That's being generous, I countered. I could have gone public. I could have let those internal records get leaked to the press. You wouldn't do that, he said, with a hint of his old self-assurance flickering. Wouldn't I? I leaned back in my chair, feeling completely calm. You taught me to protect what I create. You just never anticipated I'd use that lesson on you. He looked away for the first time all evening. Perhaps it was shame he felt. Or maybe he realized that for the first time, I wasn't the daughter seeking his approval. I was the woman who no longer required it. The bill arrived. He paid it. As we stood, he said softly, "I'll have the lawyers prepare the paperwork." I nodded in response. "Good." "And Dad," he looked up again. "I'm not returning to be your subordinate. I'm coming back as your peer. Make sure you remember that." He gave a slow nod. "Understood." I stepped out into the night air, the cool breeze a refreshing jolt to my senses. The street was quiet. My phone vibrated with a message from Sarah. "Board has been notified. New terms are being drafted. Congratulations." I didn't smile. Not yet. This wasn't finished. But the balance of influence had shifted, and for the first time in a very long while, I was exactly where I ought to be. By the start of the work week, the building looked exactly the same, but everything felt different. The reception staff stood a little taller as I walked in, and the security officer, Officer Jones, who usually just nodded without looking up, gave me a sharp, respectful, "Good morning, Miss Davis." I nodded back, wondering how much he was aware of, likely more than I assumed. In my hand, I held a brand new access card. The strap read, "Exec. Co-founder," in thick silver lettering. The elevator ride-up felt strange, familiar yet alien, like walking through a house you used to live in before it was remodeled without your consent. My level, which used to be the innovation sector, had been rearranged. My old workspace had been cleared out, and the sign on the door now said, "Daniel Walker, Head of Planning." I didn't bother knocking. Daniel was sitting behind my former desk, typing furiously, appearing quite stressed. The moment he saw me, his expression tightened. "Clara." "Daniel," I said calmly. "Looks like you've made yourself comfortable in here." He stood up. "You've got a lot of nerve showing up after what you pulled." I offered a tight smile. "Funny. That's precisely what I thought when I discovered you presenting my work as your own." He scoffed. "We were collaborating." "No," I interrupted firmly. "We were never collaborating. I brought you on board. I mentored you through your first year. I gave you complete access to everything I had built, and you used that trust to undermine me." "I didn't plan any of this," he said defensively. "Dad told me." "Stop," I cut in sharply. "Don't try to blame Dad for this. He might have given the instruction, but you were the one who carried it out." He sat back down, exhaling loudly through his nose. "So what now? You're just back as if nothing happened." "I am back," I stated. "But nothing is the same. I've reviewed the updated contract. I have majority ownership over the Genesis intellectual property. All implementations require my approval. And you are no longer permitted to access the system." His mouth dropped open slightly. "That's absurd. You can't just do." "I can," I said, placing a printed copy of the agreement onto the desk. "And I have done it." He stared at the document as though it had personally offended him. "So what? You're going to be Dad's equal now." "Daniel," I said gently but firmly, "I'm not interested in being Dad's equal. My only interest is in protecting what I created. If you want to work on your own separate projects, that's fine. But Genesis belongs to me now. Officially, permanently." He remained in stunned silence. I turned to leave, then paused in the doorway. "You could have just asked, you know? If you wanted to be involved, I would have included you on the proper terms. But instead, you went behind my back. You let Dad convince you that you deserve something you didn't build yourself. That sort of mindset, it leads to consequences." I walked out without waiting for him to respond. Later that day, I sat in my new workspace, sparse but practical, going through Genesis's live reports. Since the restrictions had been lifted, the system had resumed its predictive operations, smoothly adjusting distribution center workflows, supplier alerts, and truck scheduling across our entire logistics network. It was performing better than ever, more intelligent, more responsive. At around 2:15, Sarah knocked and entered with a list of upcoming client presentations. "We've had 6 new inquiries from major clients since this morning," she said. "Apparently, word got out that the system includes a real-time ethical component. They really want it." I nodded. Schedule them, but under the new open policy. Sarah raised an eyebrow quizzically. Open policy? Yes, I confirmed. Every implementation of Genesis from this point forward includes three things: user activity records, internal ethical monitoring, and quarterly compliance checks. I refuse to let this technology become just another corporate tool. She smiled, looking a little surprised. That's quite bold. It's necessary, I said. I've already seen what happens when power falls into the wrong hands. After she departed, I leaned back in my chair. The office was quiet. For the first time in many weeks, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time: mastery. Not over other individuals, but over myself, my creation, and the direction of what I had built. I checked my email inbox. There was one message waiting from my father. Clara, I have reviewed the documents. I understand the conditions. You have made your stance clear. For what it is worth, I am proud of what you have accomplished, even if I did not demonstrate it correctly. Dad. I did not reply. Not because I lacked care, but because sometimes silence conveys more than any words could. And in that silence, a boundary had finally been established. This was no longer simply a business. This was now mine. Roughly 4 months later, Genesis was everywhere. We had just secured our largest agreement to date, a global supply chain corporation operating across 5 continents. Genesis would function as the central control system for their logistics infrastructure, monitoring every point in real time, predicting potential issues, preventing breakdowns, and doing it all within our new ethical framework. Every contract included stipulations I had personally added: safeguards for personnel, security measures for data integrity, and automated reporting systems that activated whenever misuse was detected. I didn't just want to alter the system. I wanted to alter the way systems were managed. And the world had definitely noticed. I was invited to speak at industry conventions. A prominent magazine published a feature titled "The Innovator Who Reset the Rules." My inbox was overflowing with proposals from venture capitalists and offers to purchase my stake. But I wasn't selling because this wasn't about financial gain. It was about maintaining control over what I had built and defending it fiercely. Inside the workplace, the mood had shifted. People were initially more cautious around me, unsure of what my return signified. But I made my intentions clear. I wasn't there to penalize anyone. I was there to lead. Not out of resentment, but with clarity. Daniel, he kept his distance. After the situation calmed, he moved away from his executive duties and took on a less prominent role: partnerships coordinator. Effectively a step down in importance, if not an official title. He avoided direct interaction, though I caught him once standing quietly outside the Genesis control room, watching the screens flicker with real-time optimization data. His expression was impossible to read. My father maintained appearances. He offered congratulations publicly, praised my visionary direction at investor meetings, and even posed for pictures with me in the company's press announcements. But away from the public eye, our connection remained strictly professional, not hostile, but remote. Like two former commanders who had survived the same conflict but were no longer serving on the same side. And that felt acceptable, because some lingering hurts don't need fixing. They need to be acknowledged so you can move forward with your defenses intact. Then came the event that brought everything full circle. I was scheduled to give a speech at the company's annual innovation gathering, a major event where our top clients, investors, and associates flew in from around the globe. Backstage, I reviewed my points, took a deep breath, and stepped onto the stage. The bright lights hit me. Hundreds of faces looked back, but I wasn't nervous. I was prepared. Approximately 2 years ago, I began, this company came close to losing its future. Not due to rivals or market crashes or technological disruption, but to something far less visible: internal betrayal. There was a noticeable hush in the room. Betrayal isn't always obvious sabotage. Sometimes it's subtle: a meeting you aren't invited to, a decision made without your input, a funding line removed with your name on it. A few people nodded. Others became rigid. I didn't fight back with lawsuits or newspaper headlines. I allowed the system I created to speak for itself, because I trusted it to reveal the truth. I paused, letting that idea sink in. And here is what I have learned. You absolutely must protect what you build. Not just the code or the agreements, but your integrity, your concepts, your boundaries. More nods now were visible. Eyes were locked onto me. Because if you fail to protect them, someone else will seize them. And they won't ask permission. They'll smile as they do it. They'll claim it's just business, that it's nothing personal. I stepped forward confidently. Make it personal. The room was completely silent. Genesis didn't just predict risks. It identified patterns, and those patterns revealed a story. A story about what happens when innovation is treated like a possession rather than a purpose. Another moment of silence. I am not standing here today because I played political games. I am here because I was prepared. Because I stayed true to what I knew was right, even when it was difficult. And that is the message I want to leave you with today. I looked out at the executives, the engineers, the interns in the audience. At some point, someone will try to take what you have created. They will underestimate you, disregard you, replace you. I let that thought linger. But remember this, true influence isn't found in who gets acknowledged on the first page. It is found in who holds control over the next chapter. Applause erupted. Not deafening, but genuine. After the gathering, a young woman approached me, appearing nervous, excited, her eyes full of aspiration. Perhaps much like I used to look at my father. "Miss Davis," she said softly, "what is the secret to achieving what you did?" I smiled, handed her the microphone they had just taken from me, and replied, "Build something they absolutely cannot take from you, and make certain it knows precisely who you are." That night, I arrived home late, feeling tired, energized, and fulfilled. As I kicked off my shoes, my phone gave a soft notification. A quiet alert from the Genesis system. System integrity confirmed. Threats neutralized. Protections engaged. Creator verified. I smiled gently. Not because the battle was entirely finished, but because from this moment on, I would never again have to confront it without being fully armed.